So as we head into the second half of the year, and specifically the third quarter, July, we actually only did 3 trips, but 2 of them were pretty significant. As a matter of fact, Charlotte went out of town for the 4th of July weekend with her family, where she went to South Dakota to see Mount Rushmore, as well as she was able to go to Mount Moriah in Deadwood and was able to score Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane and a few other famous folks like that. She also scored President Hoover on that trip as well. That same weekend, I went up north, northern Ohio that is, to Put-in-Bay, where Bull and I did a variety of cemeteries in northern Ohio, and then we visited a few of the cemeteries that were actually on the island over there. So that was pretty cool weekend. Final trip we did in July, Bull and I also did another trip to Red River Gorge, and while we were down there, we picked up 3 cemeteries that were in the region. 2 of them were newer and one of them was old. The one that was newer was pretty interesting because it had a lot of cool laser etched markers because it was a fairly new cemetery. July was a good month. August was a busy month. We went to a lot of places. Most of them were regionally, 5 shoots. The first was another one of our Cincinnati famous groups. Now, for those of you that don't know, I actually give tours in cemeteries and throughout the Cincinnati area, and one that I often do is the historic Wesleyan Cemetery in Cincinnati. So after I concluded doing the tour that day, we went and tracked down a few other regional Cincinnati famous folks. So, but some of them were actually famous otherwise. Jim Bunning, and Jim Bunning was a famous Hall of Fame baseball player as well as a senator. So, yeah, we had a lot of people like that we were focusing on that shoot. After that, we had headed just a little bit northeast to Warren County, which is just nearby us. We went to Fort Ancient, which is another one of the Native American sites that is around Ohio. And for those that don't know, Ohio is quite the hotbed for Native American burial locations. So we were there, and we also found an old cemetery up there called the Old Bethel Cemetery, which had some of the relatives of the founders of the Cincinnati area. Another shoot we went on, again, this was another one of those famous shoots. On August the 23rd, we tracked down a few people around the tri-state were interesting, but one of the most interesting was the fact that we tracked down Dale Woods, who was a Colerain police officer who was who was actually hit by a car a couple of years ago, and he's buried at Spring Grove. And while we were there, we came across John Crawford. Many of you may or may not remember, but John Crawford was the guy that was shot by police up in Beaver Creek, Ohio, in the Walmart for carrying the BB gun. But yeah, he's buried at Spring Grove. So, till you go on a search, you never know who you're going to find. We also tracked down the ice cream people. Cincinnatians, we tracked down the Graders and the Aglamisi brothers. It was a good day. On the 30th of August, we went to Adams County. We were specifically going after Serpent Mound, the legendary Native American location. And while we were there, we hit a variety of cemeteries in Brown County and Adams County on the way. And we wrapped up August by going to one place that oddly had kept evading us. We had been all around Butler County. Again, that's the county just north of us in Ohio. We had been to the majority of the cemeteries there, but we kept missing this one place, Butler County Memorial Park. So we finally were able to cross that off our list and wrap up August. So September was a really busy month. We did 8 shoots that month. We did a lot of local stuff, but we did some interesting things. We kicked off the month with a shoot we called the Claremont County Extras. We visited 3 cemeteries in Claremont County that we needed. One of them was cool because it featured a guy who was actually a famous major league umpire, and he actually was featured in a Norman Rockwell painting. That was pretty cool. On the 4th, I investigated a Native American burial mound that's at UC. More needs to be known about that. I also chased down some famous people at Union Baptist Cemetery in Cincinnati. I actually found out that one of the people was a slave that was freed by Thomas Jefferson. That was pretty interesting. A couple days later, I went on another trip down to I guess we would call this southern Ohio, about as southern as it gets. We headed toward Portsmouth to go to a place called Raven Rock, which is the largest natural bridge in Ohio. It's interesting, but that's not the key. But we stopped at a few cemeteries along the way. Great place to go, just if you're looking for something to enjoy a day drive. Another hunt in nearby Claremont County. This was at the Pierce Township Cemetery. For some of you in the tri-state might remember Detective Bill Brewer was killed during a crime scene a couple of years ago, and we visited his grave and a few other at Pierce Township Memorial Park. And we also stopped at Hillcrest Cemetery in Cincinnati, which we hadn't been to in quite some time. The 20th September, we also made a few other stops, again chasing down famous people. The 27th, Bull and I were in Metamora, Indiana, and we made a few stops in and around the area and along the way. Now, the big trip we took in September was our trip to St. Louis. We went through Indiana, Illinois, and then went into Missouri. It was a 4-day trip. We hit a variety of things, tons of famous people along the way. Burl Ives was one, Hoagie Carmichael was another. We got into St. Louis, and we had went back to, I had actually been there a couple of years ago, but we went back looking for some of the places that I had missed and some of the people that I didn't go to Calvary, so we picked up like General Sherman and Dred Scott and a few other people. While we were there, we also visited the gravesite of Michael Brown. So overall, the St. Louis trip was a really amazing trip. We picked up tons of cemeteries, tons of famous people, and that took us on into one of our favorite months, which would be October. You know, Necro Travelers, many of us have friends in low places, but we have special friends in low places. Ones who are working hard to bring awareness to some of our favorite subjects. Cemeteries. The Gals in the Graveyard. They're a duo of lady conservationists who enjoy a bit of gallows humor, just like us. So join their journey, like and subscribe by going to their website at galsinthegraveyard.com. Now, October started off with a shoot that we enjoyed. It was called Missing Cemeteries. We were tracking down some of the old defunct cemeteries that were in Cincinnati, and we also included one that we had missed. But a couple were cool because they were Revolutionary War vet families and things of that nature. One of them was located right next to the Marymount Library, which was interesting. We also had another day where we chased down what we called the Chip Kings. For those of you that are in the tri-state or in the Midwest, you certainly know Grippo's and Hussman's potato chips. Well, we tracked down those founders. We also had another shoot where we were we were actually shooting photos for the fall. So we visited several cemeteries throughout the tri-state and shot up that. I had another trip where Bull and I went to Mansfield, Ohio to visit the Ohio Reformatory, which is allegedly one of the most haunted places in the country. We weren't there for the haunted tour, we were actually there for the haunted house. That wasn't that scary, but there certainly was a lot of people scared. We also did another trip in the middle of the month that we called Central Ohio. This was actually targeting Simon Kenton was one of the main goals. We headed up around Urbana and a few of the other locations in the places that are around and near Columbus, or at least on the outskirts of that. We tracked down a few famous people along that vein. Other things that happened in October, there was a Hamilton County deputy that was killed while driving, had a car accident, killed in the line of duty. He actually had a funeral procession that took place on Halloween, which right at Arlington Memorial Gardens. So we shot some video and photos of that, as well as the burial location. And later on that day, that was actually the full moon. That was that blue moon, full moon. So we went down to the local cemetery right down the street, the same one that I did the tornado shots from. And they were actually, it was an interesting shoot, but I will tell you, you can look at some of these photos and you tell me what you think you saw on full moon Halloween. But the big trip that happened in October was when Bull and I went to Atlanta. We decided that we were going to knock out several famous people that we had been targeting for a while. We actually drove to nearby Royston, which is where we tracked down the grave of Ty Cobb. And when we got back to Atlanta, we actually did Martin Luther King. And we also did the Oakland Cemetery in Atlanta, which is loaded with famous people from the area. So it was one of those long-time targeted cemeteries and one of those trips that was pretty exciting to make, because I had driven through Atlanta 1,000 times, but I had never actually had the fortune to stop. And it's a city that's definitely worth visiting if you have not been there. Okay, as we went into November, as you can imagine, the temperatures start to cool off a little bit, so we don't nearly do the kind of shooting we do in the warmer months, so we only did a couple of shoots during the month. On the 7th, we did another famous grave hunt in Spring Grove Cemetery. We also tracked down the Rose Hill Cemetery, which is a Revolutionary War vet cemetery. Well, that's not all it is, but there are several Revolutionary War vets there. And we went there. It was close to Veterans Day, and I hadn't been there in several years, and I was trying to see if it was in good shape. No, it was not. After that, we found one of the defunct cemeteries that we had been looking for quite some time, the Martini Cemetery on the west side of town. We did track that down, even though the cemetery doesn't really exist anymore. But the final shoot of the... I'm actually going to mention these out of order, because we did do another shoot in December, which was another famous grave shoot. But that was a very short one. I was targeting a couple of graves. But I wanted to close this out by the final shoot that we did of the year that had significance was our Carolinas shoot. We had to travel south to pick up actually some family members in South Carolina, so we decided to make a trip of it. And we headed for a 3-day trip where we went to Asheville, North Carolina, where we visited Riverside Cemetery and picked up a lot of famous people there. The second day, we went on to Charlotte, North Carolina, where we picked up several more people. And we finished that trip by going through Columbia, South Carolina. So there's tons of famous people that we saw along that trip. Reggie White, Lee Atwater. These are people that are just popping into my head. I'm not looking at a list or anything, but we hit tons of famous people along the way. Thomas Wolfe, O. Henry. It was a lot of big people. And we hit major cemeteries, some historic cemeteries. Brooke Benton's another person that we got. We had Medal of Honor recipients and all kinds of people. I have to say, in conclusion, we had a really successful year in 2020. We are looking forward to bigger trips coming up in 2021. As a matter of fact, if all goes well, we're going to be returning to Chicago this year. We have a New York trip planned. We hopefully are going to be going to Memphis and Texas, traveling through Alabama, Louisiana, a trip to Buffalo, another trip to Savannah, Georgia, and a few other places in Florida. And if all goes well, we may actually go to Canada this year. So, this is a 2020 in review. I appreciate everybody who's listened to these preview broadcasts. We look forward to the debut of the actual broadcast, which is going to take place on January 7th. So again, thank you for listening to the Cemetery Podcast. This is Ken Negley from the Necro Taurus, and until next time, you take care.